Mr. Okoro checked his app again. His withdrawal request had been pending for 3 days. His hands trembled slightly. He wasn't scared yet, but for the first time, he felt uncertain. And uncertainty was the beginning of the end. The room is dimly lit, a single fluorescent bulb flickering slightly. Ade sits on the edge of his bed, staring at a picture taped to the wall. It's a wedding vision board, gold-trimmed invitations, luxurious table settings, his future wife in a dazzling gown, guests celebrating in an extravagant venue. The kind of wedding that makes people whisper, they must be rich. Ade exhales, gripping his phone. He needs more money. His savings won't cover half of what he envisions. He scrolls through messages from friends, all buzzing about a new scheme that doubles your money in just 35 days. The testimonials sound promising. People are cashing out. He imagines walking into the wedding venue with the confidence of a man who made it. Easy money, no stress. Across town in a dimly lit betting shop, another scene unfolds. Young men crowd around flashing screens, gripping tickets. The air is thick with tension and cigarette smoke. A dog race is in progress. The moment is electric. The men shout, their voices overlapping in a symphony of desperation. The winning number flashes, silence, then an eruption of chaos. Some throw their hands up in victory, others slam fists against tables in frustration. Outside the shop, an elderly man observes the scene with dull, knowing eyes. He turns to the sure gain recruitment officers standing nearby, men in sharp suits handing out flyers. Their smiles are polished, words persuasive. Don't bet on dogs, bet on your future. Let your money work for you. He listens. His pension was just deposited, a lifetime of labor now sitting in his account. He's been careful his whole life, but this could change everything. Back at Ade's house, a text message pings. Bro, sure gain is paying big. First-time investors are doubling their money. Don't waste time. Ade hesitates. He's heard of scams. He's seen people lose everything, but this feels different. The testimonials, the success stories, it's happening right now. He looks at his vision board, the image of the bride smiling at him, the dream so close he can almost touch it. Outside his window, the betting shop erupts again. Another loss, another ruined dream. Ade clenches his jaw and makes a decision. Tomorrow, he will invest. Ade couldn't shake the thought. He lay awake, staring at the dark ceiling, his mind racing with possibilities. What if this was his opportunity to transform his life? What if in just a few weeks, he could afford the wedding of his dreams without stress? The stories were everywhere. People cashing out, doubling, even tripling their money. If others were succeeding, why couldn't he? By morning, his decision was made. He was going to invest. SureGain's office was a rented space in one of the busiest commercial districts, filled with flashy banners screaming promises of financial freedom. Inside, rows of chairs were occupied by eager investors, their eyes glued to screens that displayed recent transactions, deposits, payouts, success stories. The energy in the room was electric, buzzing with anticipation, hope, and something far more dangerous, unchecked greed. At the front stood Daniel, one of SureGain's most persuasive recruiters. He had a way with words, the kind of charisma that could turn doubt into unwavering belief. His smile never faltered, his gestures confident, his voice deep and reassuring. Welcome, future millionaires. Today you take control of your finances. Banks keep your money sitting still, but here at SureGain, your money is working, growing. This is not gambling. This is smart investing. People like you have turned thousands into millions. The opportunity is here. Will you take it? The crowd murmured in agreement. Ade watched as people nodded eagerly, their excitement contagious. Then, as if to reinforce the illusion, Daniel called out an investor, a young man barely in his 20s. David, tell them, how much did you invest? 500,000 naira, sir. And what did you cash out? 1 million naira in just 5 weeks. The room erupted in applause. Ade's heart pounded. It was real. People were getting rich. He pulled out his phone, launching the SureGain app. It was sleek, modern, giving the scheme an air of legitimacy. Through the app, investors could track deposits, monitor growth, and request withdrawals seamlessly. With every tap, it felt more professional, more real. Near the back of the room, a man stood motionless, Mr. Okoro, a retired civil servant. His pension had been deposited only days ago, a lifetime of savings meant to secure his future. He had promised himself he wouldn't touch it recklessly. But watching this room, hearing these testimonies, how could he ignore this opportunity? Daniel's voice cut through the crowd. Who's ready to start making real money? Ade stepped forward. I want to invest. Daniel smiled. Smart decision. How much? Ade hesitated. He had enough for a moderate investment, but what if he went all in? His wedding vision flashed before him. The grandeur, the elegance, the pride. If he played small, he'd regret it. I'll put in 1 million naira. Daniel's smile widened. That's what winners do. You'll thank yourself soon. Across the room, Mr. Okoro tightened his grip on his phone. His life savings sat in his account. Was this his last chance to live without worry? In that moment, dozens of people locked in their decisions, submitting their payments through the app, marking the beginning of their financial downfall. The days passed, and whispers of Suregain's magic spread like wildfire. Ade woke up feeling different, lighter, energized, rich, even though he hadn't seen a single payout yet. There was something intoxicating about knowing his money was growing, multiplying like magic behind the scenes. Across town, Precious felt it too. She had made an initial deposit of 50,000 naira and, like clockwork, her Suregain app flashed a notification. 100,000 naira credited. She screamed. Her trainer watched her with cautious eyes. You're playing with fire, Precious. But she wasn't listening. She had just doubled her money. To her, skill and hard work suddenly felt overrated. At the Suregain office, queues formed outside, people desperately signing up, depositing, watching their digital wallets expand overnight. The success stories piled up. Suregain wasn't just another scam, it was the answer to financial struggles. Even Mr. Okoro, the retired civil servant, couldn't resist the pull. The testimonials were too overwhelming. He had visited the office multiple times, standing at the back, watching as ordinary people turned into millionaires. Finally, he logged into the app and made his first deposit, 5 million naira, his entire pension. He sat back, heart racing, waiting for his own payday. Ade checked his phone constantly, his pulse quickening. 2 weeks in, his balance had doubled. It was real. This was real. He withdrew his first batch of profits, holding the cash in his hands, cold, fresh, untraceable. Nothing had ever felt more powerful. The feeling was addictive. The moment the money hit, he reinvested everything. And 2 million naira this time. If he kept this up, he wouldn't just have a luxurious wedding, he'd have a future he never thought possible. Precious, meanwhile, had stopped showing up for training altogether. Why should I slave away learning a skill, she argued, when I can make money without lifting a finger? Her trainer shook his head, sighing. One day you'll understand. But Precious didn't care. She had just sold her phone to reinvest. In her mind, her trainers were fools for refusing to join Suregain. At the betting shops, interest in gambling dwindled. Why bet on a horse race or a football match when Suregain promised guaranteed money? The betting companies noticed their numbers dropping, but they weren't worried. They had seen this pattern before. They knew something Suregain's victims didn't. Every illusion of wealth eventually crumbles. But for now, Ade, Precious, Mr. Okoro, and thousands of others remained blind to the truth. Because Suregain was still paying, and that was all that mattered. At first, Suregain felt like the greatest financial discovery of the decade. The city pulsed with excitement as early investors cashed out and doubled their stakes, convincing even skeptics that this was the real deal. Ade checked his balance again, 3 million naira. His hands trembled as he held his phone, scrolling through the app. It was working. He wasn't just making money, he was creating a new reality. It wasn't long before he made a bold decision. He reinvested everything. After all, why stop when the machine is printing money effortlessly? Ade wasn't alone. Across town, Precious had fully abandoned her training, smugly telling her former colleagues she had found a better way to succeed. Why waste years struggling when you can make millions in weeks? Her colleagues rolled their eyes, dismissing her. The artisans believed in skill and effort. Precious now believed in Suregain. Meanwhile, Femi, the university student, faced a dilemma. His tuition was due in a few weeks. Instead of paying, he saw an opportunity. Flip it first, then withdraw double before the deadline. His fingers hovered over the Suregain app. If others were winning, why wouldn't he? 300,000 naira, his entire school fees, sent. Across the country, the middle class was catching wind of the opportunity. Office workers, traders, teachers, even struggling businessmen were now pouring money into Suregain, excited by the success stories. A small-scale businessman reinvested his entire savings, telling his wife, "This is our breakthrough." And then, the goalposts shifted. At first, it was subtle, just a few minor changes. Instead of withdrawing everything at once, Suregain introduced a new rule. Payouts must now be staggered over several days. People noticed it, but shrugged it off. It's just a safety measure, they told themselves. Then another change. Withdrawal requests must be scheduled in advance. Still, nobody panicked. Suregain was still paying. That was all that mattered. As December approached, people poured in even more money. Holiday savings, business funds, entire salaries. It was the perfect formula. Invest now, withdraw just in time for lavish Christmas celebrations. Behind closed doors, SureGain's management watched the numbers tilt dangerously. Withdrawals were increasing, deposits were slowing. Daniel, the recruiter, reassured everyone at the office. "We are stable. This is normal." And people believed him. After all, SureGain was still working. For now. December was approaching, and SureGain's success story had reached unstoppable momentum. People weren't just investing, they were reinvesting everything. Holiday savings, bonuses, emergency funds. The dream was too good to pass up. Why keep money sitting idle when it could double or triple effortlessly? Ade, now completely convinced he had unlocked a secret path to riches, upped his stake to 5 million naira. Precious, emboldened by her previous wins, sold even more personal belongings to reinvest. Her TV, her jewelry, even her late mother's sewing machine. She saw no need for sentimental value when wealth was this easy. Mr. Okoro, the retired civil servant, had already doubled his pension savings. He refused to withdraw anything yet. Why take it out when it was still growing? He saw a future free from financial worries. Everything seemed perfect. Until SureGain's executives saw the numbers. Withdrawals were rising at an alarming rate. People were cashing out ahead of Christmas, draining the system. Deposits, once overflowing, were slowing down. For the first time, Daniel, the top recruiter, looked unsettled. "We need to hold the withdrawals back," he told SureGain's inner circle. "Just a little. If everyone takes their money at once, we're finished." And so the first minor change happened. Withdrawal requests now had to be scheduled at least 3 days in advance. The crowd noticed, but it wasn't alarming. "Just a safety measure," they murmured. Then another shift. Payouts now came in smaller portions. If you requested 500,000 naira, you got 100,000 naira first, then more over the next few days. Again, nobody panicked. SureGain was still paying. Ade, Precious, Femi, and thousands of investors noticed the delay, but they kept reinvesting. The mindset had shifted. If the money was locked in SureGain, it was safe from spending temptations. But behind closed doors, panic was creeping in. The management board was fracturing. Some of the founding partners sensed the inevitable. The scheme was running out of money, and fast. A secret meeting was held, and half of SureGain's top leaders agreed to pull their shares out quietly to protect themselves. That decision changed everything. The following morning, SureGain's financial cushion had thinned. The system was fragile now. Any sudden surge of withdrawals would break it completely. Yet, outside in the world, the illusion remained. Investors still boasted about their wins. The SureGain office was still buzzing with hopefuls ready to pour more money in. And for now, the house of cards hadn't collapsed. Yet, inside SureGain's sleek headquarters, the air was tense. The celebration in the public eye was growing. The success stories, the testimonies, the non-stop investments. But behind closed doors, the foundation was cracking. The numbers didn't lie. Too much money was being withdrawn, and deposits were trickling in slower each day. The executives knew the truth. The illusion was nearing its breaking point. For weeks, they had reassured each other, convinced they could buy more time, adjusting withdrawal policies, adding delays, making investors wait just a little longer. But now, some of the senior partners were losing faith. A private meeting was held. Only the most trusted members of SureGain's leadership attended. Daniel, the face of SureGain, sat at the center of the room. His jaw was tight, his fingers drumming against the table. He had built this empire from nothing, convincing thousands to pour their money into the system. And yet, now he could feel the walls closing in. "We can't sustain this much longer," one of the board members admitted, voice low. "We knew it wouldn't last forever. The question is, do we go down with it, or do we exit smartly?" Another whispered. Daniel's eyes scanned the room, landing on each partner. He knew what they were really saying. They were leaving. Half of SureGain's founding team had already decided they would quietly pull their money out of the system before the crash. A calculated exit, a way to protect their own financial interests before everything came tumbling down. "We will withdraw our shares over the next few days," one of them finally announced. "Not all at once. Slowly, discreetly." Daniel said nothing. He couldn't. He had spent months convincing the world that SureGain was invincible, that it was the answer to poverty, to financial struggle, that it was legitimate. And now, the very people who built it were jumping ships. Meanwhile, Ade, Precious, Mr. Okoro, and thousands of investors remained oblivious. They kept reinvesting, feeding the system, pushing their luck further and further, because SureGain was still paying. And as long as it paid, nobody questioned it. But deep inside SureGain's system, things were already shifting. The silent exit had begun. The company's financial cushion was thinning, little by little. The cracks were spreading, and soon they would be impossible to ignore. By now, SureGain's influence had seeped into every corner of the city. Restaurants, barbershops, university dormitories, every conversation carried whispers of SureGain's promise. It wasn't just a scheme anymore. It was a movement, a revolution where for the first time, ordinary people believed they had cracked the code to financial success without struggle. Ade, now fully immersed, no longer saw himself as an investor. He saw himself as a strategist, a mastermind playing the money game better than anyone else. His balance had ballooned to 10 million naira, and instead of withdrawing, he pushed it further, reinvesting again. Precious followed suit. She had sold her final possessions, convinced she was on the brink of generational wealth. Meanwhile, Mr. Okoro, the retired civil servant, was dreaming bigger than ever. "This is our ticket to freedom," he told his wife, showing her his SureGain account balance. She studied the numbers but felt uneasy. Numbers on a screen were not real. And then, the first major warning sign appeared. Ade logged into his SureGain app one morning, expecting the usual smooth transactions. But something was different. His balance was still growing, but when he tapped withdraw, a message flashed. "Your withdrawal request is being processed. Due to high transaction volumes, payouts may take up to 5 to 7 business days." Ade frowned but shrugged it off. It made sense. After all, so many people were withdrawing. Delays were normal, right? At SureGain's office, investors started murmuring amongst themselves. "Why is my withdrawal taking so long? I thought we could cash out instantly. My payout is coming in parts, not the full amount." And yet Daniel, the recruiter, remained as charismatic as ever. Standing confidently before the crowd, he reassured them with his signature charm. "Ladies and gentlemen, SureGain is growing bigger than we imagined. With such massive success, minor adjustments must be made to ensure long-term stability. Delays are temporary. Your money is safe." The crowd wanted to believe him. After all, SureGain was still paying, just slower. But behind closed doors, SureGain's management was in full-blown crisis mode. Withdrawals were outpacing deposits at a dangerous rate. Their financial buffer was nearly exhausted, and the silent exit by half of the founding partners had left them exposed. At home, Mr. Okoro checked his app again. His withdrawal request had been pending for 3 days. His hands trembled slightly. He wasn't scared yet, but for the first time, he felt uncertain. And uncertainty was the beginning of the end. By now, whispers had turned into uneasy murmurs. The once celebratory tone that surrounded SureGain was shifting, subtle but undeniable. Investors still had money in the system, their balances were still rising, but something felt off. Ade refreshed his app again, waiting for his payout request to complete. It had been 5 days now. He rubbed his temples, forcing himself to stay calm. SureGain had always paid. Maybe this was just a small hiccup, a temporary delay. Meanwhile, Precious had her own concerns. She had invested everything, every single item of value she owned. She needed to withdraw, but when she tapped cash out, she saw something new. Due to system maintenance, large withdrawals are temporarily restricted. Please withdraw in smaller portions. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't normal. At SureGain's office, the atmosphere was different. The recruiters, once confident, loud, persuasive, were quieter now, their smiles thinner. The energy wasn't excitement anymore. It was tension. Mr. Okoro sat at home, pacing back and forth. His pension savings, the money meant to sustain him for the rest of his life, was trapped inside SureGain. And for the first time, he was scared. On social media, early SureGain investors were still boasting. "Relax, SureGain always pays. This isn't a scam, they're just upgrading their system. Stay calm and don't withdraw yet. The real winners hold their money." People wanted to believe this. They needed to believe this. But behind closed doors, SureGain's management was falling apart. Daniel slammed his fist against the table, his eyes burning with frustration. "We need more deposits. Now." "We've changed withdrawal rules 3 times already," one executive argued. "People are getting restless," another added. Daniel exhaled sharply. The only way to buy more time was to keep people believing. So, a new announcement was made. SureGain is launching a special New Year promo. Deposit now and earn 30% extra returns. It was genius. A distraction, an illusion to keep people reinvesting instead of withdrawing. And it worked, temporarily. Day, Precious, and countless others held on, convinced everything was fine. But Mr. Okoro was no fool. The cracks were growing wider, and he could feel it in his gut. Something terrible was about to happen. At first, the illusion held. Investors continued depositing funds, convinced that Suregain's New Year promo was yet another golden opportunity. The promise of 30% extra returns sounded too good to resist, and for a while, the strategy worked. It kept deposits flowing in, buying Suregain a little more time, but time was running out. Day refreshed his Suregain app, scanning his balance, 15 million naira. It looked incredible, but the money was only real if he could withdraw it, and he was still waiting. 5 days turned into 7, then 10. The excuses from Suregain were endless. System upgrades, high-volume transactions, new withdrawal policies to streamline payments. Day tried to convince himself it was normal, but something felt off. He had never had to wait this long before. Precious was growing restless too. She had put everything into Suregain, her savings, her possessions, and yet when she tried withdrawing even a fraction of it, she received the same automated message. Your transaction is pending. On social media, conflicting messages emerged. Some Suregain investors still defended the company, urging others to be patient and trust the process. If you withdraw now, you're sabotaging the system. Hold your money and let Suregain work. Others, however, weren't convinced. They had seen this before. The classic signs of a collapsing scheme. Meanwhile, inside Suregain's headquarters, chaos had erupted. Daniel stood at the center of the conference room, his face tight with frustration. The withdrawals were happening faster than they could control. People were still reinvesting, but not enough to keep Suregain afloat. One of the senior partners leaned in, whispering urgently, "We're bleeding money. We don't have enough to cover the next withdrawal cycle." Daniel knew what that meant. The illusion was cracking. It wasn't just delays anymore. Soon, people would realize the truth. Outside Suregain's office, a small crowd had gathered. At first, it was just a few confused investors staring at their phones, murmuring about pending transactions. But as the hours stretched into days, the unease grew louder. Ade was among them. He clenched his phone, eyes scanning the Suregain app over and over, searching for an update. 15 million naira sitting in his account, but unreachable. He glanced at the investors beside him, their expressions mirroring his own. Confusion, suspicion, fear. Precious wasn't far behind. She pushed through the crowd, her heart pounding. She had nothing left outside of Suregain. Every asset, every savings had been funneled into the scheme. She couldn't afford to lose. Inside, Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead. The whispers among Suregain's partners had grown sharper. Some were already planning their escape. "We should disappear before this turns into a riot. We can't control this anymore." Daniel knew they were right, but still, he hesitated. "Just buy us more time," he snapped. "We need one last announcement." And so, Suregain issued one final reassurance. "Our servers are undergoing maintenance to process the high volume of withdrawals. Please remain patient." Suregain is committed to ensuring everyone receives their payouts. It was a lie. And for some, it was the last lie they would believe. Mr. Okoro read the announcement carefully. Something inside him snapped. He had ignored the warnings, convinced himself that Suregain was different, but now he saw it for what it was. A trap. His pension savings, the security he had worked his entire life to build, was gone. And outside Suregain's office, the crowd grew restless. The illusion was shattering. The storm was coming. The crowd outside Suregain's office had doubled overnight. Investors who had once sung praises of the company were now demanding answers. Ade stood among them. His jaw clenched, sweat forming at his temples. He had checked his Suregain app every hour for the past 2 days. His balance was still there, and 15 million naira staring back at him. But his withdrawal request was still pending. Beside him, Precious frantically scrolled through her app, biting her lip. The money was there, but unreachable. Every time she tried withdrawing, she was met with the same frustrating message. "System undergoing routine maintenance. Please try again later." Later. How much later? The unease in the crowd was turning into anger. Mr. Okoro arrived, his eyes dark, drained. He had barely slept. The realization had fully sunk in now. His pension was gone. The security he had spent decades building had been swallowed up. Inside the Suregain headquarters, Daniel stared at the growing mob outside. The doors were still locked, but the crowd was becoming more restless. A junior employee stepped forward, nervous. "Sir, they're asking for someone to address them." Daniel inhaled sharply. There was nothing to say. The Suregain boardroom had emptied the night before. Key figures had fled, some had wiped their personal accounts clean, quietly withdrawing funds before things collapsed completely. Suregain was running on fumes. Back outside, the shouting grew louder. "Where's our money? Why won't they let us withdraw?" They said Suregain was different. They lied. The tension snapped like a rope pulled too tight. A man charged toward the entrance, slamming his fists against the locked glass doors. Others followed, hammering the doors, voices rising into chaos. Ade watched in stunned silence. This wasn't what he had imagined. This wasn't supposed to happen. Precious grabbed his arm, panic flaring in her eyes. What do we do? Before he could answer, the glass shattered. The crowd poured in, storming the empty office, knocking over furniture, ripping down banners. The once pristine Suregain headquarters was turning into a battlefield of broken promises. And yet, there was no one there to answer them. Because Suregain's masterminds had already vanished. The streets were filled with voices, shouting, crying, demanding answers that no one had. The crash of Suregain had hit like a sudden storm, swallowing people's wealth overnight. Thousands of investors were stranded, their life savings gone, their dreams shattered in a blink. Ade stood among them, gripping his phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. 15 million naira. He had watched it grow, had celebrated his success, had convinced himself he had cracked the system. But now, it was nothing more than a meaningless number on a frozen app. Precious was shaking, her breathing shallow. She had lost everything. Everything. Mr. Okoro sat on the pavement, staring blankly into space. His pension, his future had vanished. He wasn't crying, he wasn't screaming, he was simply lost. By noon, the crowd had expanded beyond Suregain's empty office. People flooded the streets, demanding intervention. Where are the owners? The government needs to do something. This is robbery. Local authorities were overwhelmed. Police officers stood cautiously, observing the chaos, but unsure of how to respond. Inside a government office, senior officials sat around a long wooden table, discussing the disaster unfolding before them. How did we miss this? How was Suregain even operating without proper regulation? How much money are we talking about? The numbers were staggering. Billions had disappeared overnight, but there was no one left to blame. The masterminds had already vanished, slipping away like shadows before the storm hit. A legal team was assembled, tasked with tracking Suregain's founders, freezing assets, uncovering where the money had gone. But for Ade, Precious, Mr. Okoro, and thousands of victims, it was already too late. Their money was gone, and no investigation could bring it back. The streets had quieted, but the devastation remained. Days had passed since Suregain's collapse, and yet, the weight of it still hung heavily over the city. The once bustling marketplace felt different, less lively, more subdued. People whispered about lost fortunes, shattered dreams, and the cruel lesson Suregain had taught them. Ade sat at his kitchen table, staring at his phone. The Suregain app still showed his balance, 15 million naira, but now he knew the truth. It was meaningless. Numbers on a screen, nothing more. His fiancée walked in, studying him carefully. She had heard the rumors but hadn't pressed him for details. Now, as she saw the hollow look in his eyes, she finally spoke. It's gone, isn't it? Ade exhaled shakily, gripping the edge of the table. Every last naira. Across town, Precious lay on her bed, motionless. She had sold everything to chase Suregain's promises, her clothes, her furniture, even her mother's sewing machine. And now, she had nothing. Her trainers had warned her. They had begged her to think logically, to see through the illusion. She hadn't listened. Now she had no money, no training, no future. At his home, Mr. Okoro sat in silence, his wife watching him anxiously. She had seen him strong, she had seen him tired. But this was different. His hands trembled slightly as he held his phone. His pension, his security for the rest of his life had been swallowed into the void. Gone. What do we do now? She asked softly. Mr. Okoro didn't answer. Because he didn't know. The entire city felt the weight of Suregain's deception. People had gambled their school fees, their rent, their family savings, their future, and now they had nothing. Some filed complaints with the authorities, hoping for justice, but deep inside, they knew the truth. The money was never coming back. Some cursed Suregain's founders, praying they would be found and punished, and some simply sat in silence, drowning in regret. The lesson had come too late. Time had moved forward, but the wounds remained, and life continued. Suregain was gone, reduced to nothing but a bitter memory, a lesson carved into the lives of its victims. Ade had spent days replaying his mistakes, wondering what could have been if he just resisted the temptation of fast wealth. He had dreamed of a grand wedding, financial security, a future free of struggle, but Suregain had stolen all of that. Now, he worked small jobs, rebuilding piece by piece. The humiliation of his downfall clung to him, but his fiancée reminded him gently, "We have to move forward." It wasn't about riches anymore. It was about starting over. Honestly, Ade finally had rebuilt his life, not through shortcuts, but through patience. He sat in a modest gathering, celebrating his wedding. There were no grand entrances, no extravagant displays of wealth, no expensive champagne flowing in golden glasses, but there was peace. His fiancée laughed beside him, warmth radiating through the room, and for the first time in a long while, Ade realized something profound. He hadn't needed millions to be happy. Precious had returned to her training. At first, the weight of her failure made every step painful, but as time passed, she understood she had needed this fall. She had needed to learn that hard work was the only real investment. For the first time in months, she was smiling again, crafting pieces she could be proud of. She was rebuilding, but some wounds couldn't heal. Mr. Okoro's wife sat alone in their quiet home, staring at his empty chair. He had spent decades saving, preparing for retirement, only for it all to vanish. Sure gain had stolen more than just money. It had stolen his will to go on. And one night, the weight of that loss became too much. She called his name, touched his shoulder, but there was no response. Grief struck like lightning. Sure gain had claimed another victim, not just financially, but entirely. The news of Mr. Okoro's passing spread quietly, another painful reminder of what Sure gain had destroyed. Ade heard the whispers, his chest tightening. It had never just been about money. Precious stayed silent when she heard the news, pushing herself harder in training. She knew now, no amount of effort could erase the scars Sure gain had left behind. Precious wiped sweat from her brow, putting the finishing touches on a handcrafted piece. She had built this with her own hands. Her success was no longer tied to illusions of fast money, but to skill, patience, and dedication. Hard work, something she had once laughed at. Now she understood, true wealth was earned, not gambled. But for some, the scars would never fade. Mr. Okoro's wife sat alone, staring out the window where her husband had once sat. His absence was a heavy silence, an irreplaceable void that time could never fully heal. She sighed, gripping her cup tightly. She had survived, but some losses can never be undone. Meanwhile, the world moved on. Months later, new financial Ponzi schemes emerged in various forms, in disguise of crypto or forex trading as claimed, promising secured investment and financial freedom. Fresh promises of easy wealth, confident recruiters spinning the same lies. Some people walked past, wiser now, cautious, unwilling to be fooled again. But others, those who hadn't learned the lesson, paused, listened, asked questions. New victims waiting to be caught in the cycle, because greed never truly disappears. And as the city healed, some victims moved forward, while others remained trapped in the past, waiting for their lost fortune to return. But it never would. And as the debate about financial scams grew, one lingering question refused to fade. Where were the regulators? Where was the government? How had Sure gain flourished unchecked? How had a scam so massive operated without intervention? And why, despite countless warnings, were similar schemes still emerging? Who should be held accountable? The debate remained open-ended, shifting from household conversations to online discussions, fueled by outrage, regret, and the desperate search for answers. But at its core, one undeniable truth remained. There are no shortcuts to wealth. And as long as people ignore that truth, history will continue repeating itself. So the final question is this: when the next illusion appears, will people finally recognize it, or will they fall again? If this story resonated with you, or you found value in this video or connected with its message, help us grow. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notification bells so you never miss our next story. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.